And he's using music and entertainment to traffic.
How
Who
was
was
he
mentored by Clive Davis.
Did he struggle with the idea of coming out publicly? Was that something that you talked about at all?
But he wasn't going to come out and say this to the world. And he had a lot of lady fans, and he told me that he just didn't want to upset the world.
What happened to Luther Vandross after he sold his soul? You hear his voice and think romance, elegance, perfection. But that voice came at a price. Behind the bright lights and timeless melodies was a man burdened by struggles most fans never knew. This is the untold story of Luther Vandross. The highs that made him a legend and the lows that left him forever changed.
My middle name is Ronzoni.
No, is this really true?
It is actually. It's on the birth certificate and everything.
Luther Ronzoni
Vandross.
Luther Vandross, the velvet voice behind timeless classics like Never Too Much and Here and Now, seemed to have it all: fame, talent, and legions of adoring fans. But behind the luxurious vocals and platinum records was a man weighed down by loneliness, secrets, and a haunting sense that he had traded too much for success. In 2017, Patti LaBelle appeared on Watch What Happens Live and gave a rare, painful glimpse into Luther's hidden life. She hinted that Luther's silence about who he truly was didn't just come from personal fear, but also from the pressure of the music industry, the kind of pressure that breaks a person down behind the scenes, while the world cheers on the stage performance. According to Patti, they weren't just colleagues. They were like family. She even revealed Luther was the first president of her fan club.
He hooked us up with these gowns. I don't know where he got them. And then he became my first fan club president.
Wow.
And he became like my best friend.
Andy Cohen, never one to shy away, asked Patti directly about Luther's orientation. She didn't hesitate. She said Luther was scared to come out, terrified of what it might do to his mother, and to his relationship with his mostly female audience.
He did not want his mother to be, although she might have known, but he wasn't going to come out and say this to the world. And he had a lot of lady fans, and he told me that he just didn't want to upset the world.
And yet, everyone in the business kind of knew. Writer Bruce Vilanch, journalist Michael Musto, they all said it quietly. Luther was in the life, as they put it. Deep in the closet, not because he wanted to be, but because the industry required it. To truly grasp the cost of Luther's pain, we have to talk about what the music industry does to its stars, especially in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't just about creating hits, it was about creating illusions. Illusions that sold records, even if it meant destroying the artist behind them. Luther was a private person by nature, but the contracts and the handlers turned his privacy into a cage. Industry power players like Clive Davis didn't just mold careers, they molded entire lives. There were always rumors that Clive asked for more than just vocals, that the price for protection, airplay, and promotion came with unspoken expectations.
And he's using music and entertainment to traffic.
How
Who
was
was
he
mentored by Clive Davis.
Now, rumor has it, allegedly, Diddy got on his knees for Clive Davis in 1994.
In the early 1980s, Luther signed with Clive Davis's new record label, J Records. Clive Davis was a legendary figure in the music industry, known for discovering and nurturing talent. But for Luther, signing with Davis came at a high cost.
3 weeks before the show was due to be taped, I called up Dion. I said, you know what? I can't do Soul Train, the second one. I can't do this. I can't do it.
After joining J Records, Luther's career initially soared. He released several successful albums and enjoyed commercial success. However, the pressures of the industry began to take a toll on him. Luther struggled with his weight, his health deteriorated, and he became increasingly isolated. Exclusive interviews reveal that Luther was not happy. He felt trapped by the demands of the industry and the constant pressure to produce hits. friends and colleagues noticed a change in him, both physically and mentally. But Luther's story of compromise didn't begin with Clive Davis. His life had been shaped by loss and longing long before he entered the industry's web of deception. Luther Vandross Jr. was born on April 20th, 1951, in New York City. He grew up in Manhattan's Lower East Side in the Alfred E. Smith public housing development. His family was tight-knit and filled with music, back when music was pure before it became corrupted by industry machinery. His mother, Mary Ida, was a nurse, and his father, Luther Sr., worked as an upholsterer. Luther was naturally drawn to music, and by the time he was just 3 years old, had already taught himself to play the piano by ear. As a child, Luther's life was full of authentic joy, the kind that would later be systematically stripped away. He loved going to the beach, dancing around the living room, and sharing genuine laughs with his family. But everything changed in 1959. After a family trip to the beach, his father suddenly passed away. Luther was only 8 years old, and the loss was devastating. This early trauma created a void that would later make him vulnerable to anyone who promised to fill it, even if the price was his soul. Music became his escape, but also his first taste of how art could mask pain. It was the one thing that helped him cope with his grief, but it also taught him that performance could substitute for authentic healing. Even as an adult, he admitted, "I still carry that pain with me. Whenever I see a father and son on TV or in a movie, it fills me with sadness for what I missed." Luther Vandross grew up in a family rich with musical talent, but also marked by lost chances. His sister Patricia nearly broke through with the Crests, but their mother refused to let her tour with boys. So the group went on to succeed without her. That moment taught Luther how easily dreams could slip away. He became obsessed with not missing his shot, even if it meant sacrificing parts of himself. Inspired by Patricia and Sister Anne, Luther watched legends like Dionne Warwick and Diana Ross, slowly realizing that success in music wasn't about truth. It was about becoming whoever the industry wanted. Dionne Warwick became Luther's ultimate inspiration, but also his first lesson in the power of manufactured perfection. He admired everything about her: her voice, her poise, and the way she made performing look so effortless.
I was sitting in the theater, and this girl singer came on in a red dress, okay? And I can tell you specifically that right at that moment, I knew that I wanted to be able to affect people the way that she had affected me, and that, of course, turned out to be Dionne.
Luther's passion for music didn't stop at admiration. It became an obsession that would eventually consume him. He was determined to make a name for himself, but somewhere along the way, that determination curdled into a willingness to sacrifice anything for success. He practiced constantly, not just his singing, but also his ability to perform and connect with an audience. But he was also learning to perform himself, to become a character rather than a person. By high school, Luther Vandross had found his rhythm in life through music, but he was also beginning to understand the power of secrets and the price of desire. He formed a singing group called Shades of Jade with classmates and his best friend, Robin. They performed wherever they could, including the Apollo Theater's famous amateur night. Though they didn't win, Luther wasn't discouraged. He had bigger dreams and, at just 16, was already learning that wanting something badly enough could make you do anything to get it. Luther had fallen in love for the first time, but it wasn't the kind of love that made you feel complete. It was the kind that taught you about yearning and rejection. In Craig Seymour's book, Luther, The Life and Longing of Luther Vandross, Luther admitted, "The person was almost like, 'Thank you, but I'm not interested.' The rejection cut deep, but it also planted the first seeds of his willingness to reshape himself for acceptance. It was very painful and alienating," he said. This early rejection became a template for his future relationships with the industry. He learned that love, whether romantic or professional, required sacrifice, compromise, and often the abandonment of your true self. To cope with the pain, he turned to food, beginning a cycle of using external things to fill internal voids. "The first thing I'd do if I was depressed or rejected was eat," he later confessed. Despite the sting of rejection, Luther threw himself into music with the fervor of someone trying to prove his worth. His group, Shades of Jade, joined a performing youth ensemble called Listen, My Brother, at the Apollo. They were making progress, but Luther was also learning that success required playing roles, fitting into predetermined molds, and hiding the parts of yourself that didn't sell. The group performed at the 1969 Harlem Cultural Festival and even recorded singles. They were later invited to be part of the pilot episode for a new children's show called Sesame Street. While others celebrated these milestones, Luther was already beginning to feel the weight of performance. At 18, he still hadn't found authentic love or acceptance, and was beginning to believe that maybe he never would, unless he was willing to become someone else entirely. In a 1990 interview, Luther reflected on his early isolation with words that would prove prophetic. "Maybe that's why, when everyone was forming couples and falling in love, I missed out. Romance was all around me, but I was distracted. My life was in the headphones." Music had become his refuge, but it was also becoming his prison. It was safer than real relationships, more controllable than genuine intimacy, but it was also slowly separating him from his authentic self. "It was an obsession," he admitted. "It still is." High school was a whirlwind of music and dreams, but Luther was also developing his talent for devotion that bordered on worship. His love for Patti LaBelle led him to found her first ever fan club while at William Howard Taft High School, where he served as president. It was serious business to him, and he threw himself into it with the same intensity he would later bring to sacrificing his identity for success. But by the time he graduated, Luther knew he needed more than just fan clubs or local gigs. He briefly attended Western Michigan University, but soon dropped out to chase his dreams of making it big. This was the first major compromise, abandoning traditional security for the uncertain promise of stardom. In those early days, Luther worked odd jobs while trying to break into the music industry. He was learning the hustle, the networking, the way relationships could be transactional. Then, in the mid-1970s, what seemed like a golden opportunity came knocking. Ken Harper, a former DJ, was producing The Wiz, an all-black retelling of The Wizard of Oz for Broadway. Harper was looking for fresh music, and Luther's song, Everybody Rejoice, A Brand New Day, made the cut.
It's such a change for us to live so independently.
The song became a standout moment in the production, marking a turning point in Luther's career. Another life-changing opportunity came through his friend Robin, who had married a guitarist working with David Bowie. One day, she invited Luther to a listening session at Bowie's studio. There, Luther's keen ear and suggestions caught Bowie's attention. Soon, Bowie hired him to arrange and sing background vocals for his album Young Americans. Luther even contributed a reworked version of one of his own songs, which became Bowie's track Fascination. Touring with Bowie as both a background singer and an opening act gave Luther a taste of life outside New York. It was exciting, but bittersweet. He was still searching for his place in the spotlight. After the Bowie tour, Luther worked with Bette Midler on her live shows, arranging music and singing background vocals. But even then, Luther felt like he was hiding. Midler's backup singers, known as the Harlettes, were usually slim, female, and glamorous. Everything Luther wasn't. So he stayed in the shadows, literally singing from behind the curtain. It was a humbling experience for someone with a voice as extraordinary as his. Yet, the most significant obstacle wasn't where he stood on stage. It was his own self-doubt. Luther desperately wanted the world to not only hear his voice, but see him as a star. However, the fear that he wasn't good enough held him back. "I didn't believe I could be a true solo artist," he later admitted. In those early years, Luther's journey was marked by moments of success, but also a lingering sense of loneliness. He was a man with a dream, pouring all his love into music because it was the one thing that never let him down. Even when he felt invisible or inadequate, music was there, a steady companion in an otherwise lonely world. And while the road to stardom wasn't easy, Luther's determination and raw talent would eventually lead him to the recognition he so deeply craved. In the 1970s, Luther Vandross was hustling to make a name for himself in the music world. He formed a new group called Luther, which included talented singers Anthony Hinton, Diane Suler, Teresa V. Reed, and Christine Wilshire. While they released a few singles that gained some attention, none of them became major hits. To support himself, Luther wrote jingles for commercials and sang backup for big names like Chaka Khan, Roberta Flack, and his idol, Diana Ross. Despite these gigs earning him an impressive $600,000 a year at one point, real stardom still seemed out of reach. By 1980, Luther the group had disbanded, but Luther's hard work hadn't gone unnoticed. He caught the eye of Jacques-Fred Petrus, a French-Italian producer who wanted Luther to sing for his pop dance group, Change. Luther's soulful voice led the group to success with tracks like Searching and The Glow of Love, both reaching #1 on the US dance charts. However, disagreements over pay caused Luther to step away from the project. Luck was finally on his side when he signed a solo deal with Epic Records in 1981. But by now, Luther had learned that luck in the music industry often came with hidden costs. That same year, Luther released his debut album, Never Too Much. The title track, written by Luther himself, became an instant hit, topping the R&B charts and cementing his status as a rising star. Songs like Don't You Know That? And A House Is Not a Home showcased his ability to infuse raw emotion into his music, earning him a devoted following. Throughout the 1980s, Luther built a reputation as a powerhouse artist. His second album, Forever, For Always, For Love, 1982, was another success, featuring popular tracks like Bad Boy, Having a Party, and Since I Lost My Baby. I can't find By now, Luther was a household name, earning Grammy nominations and collaborating with idols like Aretha Franklin. Working with Aretha on her album, Jump to It, was a dream come true for Luther. The title track became Aretha's first top 40 hit in 6 years, and the album went gold. However, their relationship hit a rough patch during the recording of her follow-up album in 1983. When Luther gave Aretha notes on her singing, she was offended. She thought, "How dare he tell me how to sing?" Their disagreement escalated, leading Aretha to storm out of the studio and drive back to Detroit. It wasn't until Cissy Houston, Whitney Houston's mother, intervened that they reconciled and completed the album Get It Right, which also became a hit. Despite his professional success, Luther often felt isolated. Fame and fortune didn't erase the loneliness that lingered in his personal life. Though he was adored by fans and respected by his peers, Luther rarely shared his deepest thoughts or struggles with anyone. Many of his songs, filled with longing and heartbreak, hinted at the emotions he kept hidden. For someone who could move millions with his voice, Luther often found it difficult to connect with others on a personal level. In 1983, Luther released his own album, Busy Body, featuring the smash hit Superstar. He also fulfilled a lifelong dream by recording a duet with Dionne Warwick, one of his biggest inspirations, on the song How Many Times Can We Say Goodbye?
And how many times can
Despite the friendships and collaborations with artists he admired, Luther's private life remained just that, private. He poured everything into his music, which became both his refuge and his way of expressing emotions he rarely shared aloud. For all the joy his songs brought to others, Luther himself often wrestled with feelings of isolation. In the mid-1980s, Luther Vandross made headlines for his dramatic weight loss. He shed 126 pounds, transforming his appearance and igniting a whirlwind of rumors. Questions swirled about how and why he lost the weight, with some speculating it was related to health concerns, and others assuming it was purely for vanity. Luther explained that he had gone on a diet and was committed to improving his health, but this transformation wasn't just about physical health. It was about becoming the person he thought the industry wanted him to be. Luther hinted that his new physique was motivated by a desire to look good for someone special, but he couldn't reveal that the someone special was really himself, the self he'd lost somewhere along the way. This wasn't the first time Luther's appearance had been scrutinized. Throughout his career, his weight fluctuated as he struggled with using food to fill the void left by his abandoned, authentic self. As a larger man in a field dominated by slim and conventionally attractive artists, Luther often faced criticism that went beyond music. The industry's focus on his appearance was really about control, another way to make him feel inadequate and willing to change. The pressure intensified when Blues and Soul, a British music magazine, falsely reported that Luther was suffering from AIDS in 1985. The rumor spread like wildfire, threatening to destroy everything he'd built. Luther vehemently denied the claim and threatened to sue the publication, but the damage was done. He realized that no matter how much he sacrificed, the industry could still destroy him on a whim. Luther's refusal to discuss his relationships wasn't just about privacy, it was about survival. He had learned that authenticity was a luxury he couldn't afford. Unlike many celebrities who shared their romantic lives with the public, he kept his personal life completely sealed off, understanding that revelation could mean career death. Despite the silence, his music told the story of a soul in torment. Songs like A House Is Not a Home and Superstar were filled with the anguish of someone who had traded their authentic self for success. Fans could feel the depth of his pain through his voice, even if they didn't understand its source. Luther had immense love within him, but he'd been forced to channel it through his art rather than his life. Behind the scenes, the cost of his choices was destroying Luther from within. The pressure to maintain his manufactured image, combined with the constant invasion of his privacy, created a prison he couldn't escape. Though adored by millions, he felt more alone than ever. His weight struggles became a physical manifestation of the internal battles he fought daily, the war between who he was and who he'd been forced to become. Luther Vandross was a superstar. Some would even call him a diva, but behind the dazzling smile and soulful voice lay a life filled with challenges and heartbreak. One of his most famous feuds was with Anita Baker. In 1987, they were set to perform a duet at the Grammys, but at the last minute, Anita chose to sing a tribute to Billie Holiday instead, leaving Luther blindsided. That same night, he lost his Grammy nomination, adding insult to injury. Their relationship never fully recovered, even when they co-headlined a tense yet wildly successful tour. Another infamous clash came with En Vogue in 1993. Opening for Luther on his Never Let Me Go tour, the girl group found themselves bound by strict rules. They couldn't wear certain colors, sparkles, or anything that might upstage Luther's show. Tensions boiled over when Luther called the police after they disregarded his demands. Meanwhile, Luther was struggling personally. His beloved sister passed away during the tour, his longtime manager quit, and he often returned home to an empty house. For all his fame, there was a deep loneliness in his life. In 2003, Luther released Dance with My Father, a heart-wrenching tribute to his late dad. The title track won a Grammy, but by then, his health was failing. He suffered a stroke that left him unable to speak or sing, robbing him of the two things that defined him. Despite a lifetime of songs that celebrated love, Luther never found that kind of lasting connection for himself. Friends said he longed for a partner, but that dream remained out of reach. Luther's final appearance was on The Oprah Winfrey Show in May 2004. By July 1, 2005, he was gone at just 54 years old. The man who sang of love so beautifully spent much of his life without it. He gave his all to the world through his music, but it's heartbreaking to think that the deep, romantic love he sang about wasn't something he fully experienced. But despite his loneliness, Luther's influence had stretched far and wide, and his fellow artists never hesitated to sing his praises.
I always knew that you were blessed, Luther, with God's special touch. And the more that we listened, it was like, never too much, never too much, never too much.
In the end, Luther Vandross lived a life that looked beautiful from the outside, but was filled with quiet despair. He got the awards, the fame, the admiration, but not the peace. He followed the industry's rules. He made himself marketable. He stayed quiet, and that silence may have killed him faster than the stroke did. Because behind every soulful ballad was a man who felt unloved. Behind every award show standing ovation was someone wondering if he had made the right choice. Yes, he sang love songs, but he never got to sing one about himself. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.